We live in a culture that is just absolutely obsessed with productivity.
Not completely.
If you aren't side hustling or, I don't know, optimizing your morning routine or turning your downtime into some kind of skill building seminar, you're somehow wasting time.
Right. It's the lazy Sunday fallacy. The idea that a hobby is just a way to kill time until the real work starts again.
Right. But today, we're looking at a guide that argues that for a specific segment of the population, that entire framing is, well, it's dangerous. We're diving into a piece from HeyASD called 25 Plus Best Hobbies for Autistic Adults That Actually Feel Good.
Yeah.
And the first thing that jumped out at me wasn't the list itself. It was the way they redefine the word.
How so?
They don't call them pastimes, they call them lifelines. And that feels like a massive shift in stakes.
It is a massive shift, and it's a necessary one. I mean, you have to consider the source here. This guide was written by an editorial team of autistic creators. So this isn't a clinician looking at a patient and saying, you should knit to improve your dexterity. This is lived experience. And when they use a word like lifeline, they're referring to the fact that the neurodivergent brain is often processing a world that feels incredibly chaotic, loud, unpredictable.
So for me, sitting down to build a model airplane might just be fun. But you're saying for an autistic adult, that same activity is doing something physiologically different.
Precisely. It's doing heavy lifting. It's all about emotional regulation.
Okay.
The source breaks this down into a few core pillars. One is regulating the nervous system, managing what the community calls shutdowns or meltdowns. Another is self-expression without the tax of verbal communication.
And the third?
The third is something they call predictable joy.
Predictable joy. That's an interesting phrase. I mean, usually we associate joy with surprise, right? The unexpected gift, the plot twist.
Yeah, we do.
Why is predictability the goal here?
Because if your baseline experience of the world is that it's just randomly assaulting your senses, lights are too bright, sounds are too loud, social rules change without warning, then predictability becomes a sanctuary.
I see.
You need a corner of the universe where A always leads to B. If you plant a seed, it grows. If you follow the knitting pattern, the scarf appears. That reliability provides a dopamine hit that signals safety.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like manufacturing a control group in the experiment of life.
That is a great way to put it.
So let's get into the lab. The guide breaks these down into categories, and I want to start with the one that seems most obvious but maybe has more going on under the hood. Creative expression.
Art and music.
Exactly. Now, we always hear art is therapeutic, but why specifically for this demographic? Is it just about painting your feelings?
It is, but it's also about bypassing the bottleneck of language. We have to remember that for many autistic adults, verbal communication it's high friction.
High friction.
It requires translating complex, non-linear thoughts into linear sentences, monitoring your tone, checking eye contact. It is exhausting.
It's like running an emulator on a computer that takes up like 90% of the CPU.
Yes. And that leaves very little processing power for the actual emotion. Visual arts painting, sculpting, photography, they allow for a direct dump of that data.
A direct dump.
You don't have to explain the texture of your anxiety to anyone. You can just paint a jagged red line. The source highlights that this creates a container for emotions, a safe space where you can explore ideas without that social pressure.
And what about the physical side of it? Because the guide mentions things like sculpting or working with clay.
So that connects to the sensory aspect. The tactile feedback of the clay or the resistance of a paintbrush can be incredibly grounding. It helps develop fine motor skills, sure, but more importantly, it functions as a form of stimming.
Self-stimulatory behavior.
Right. It's a repetitive sensory-seeking action that helps regulate the brain's arousal levels.
Then you have music. And I was surprised by this one because I often hear that autistic individuals can be sensitive to noise. Wouldn't learning the drums or the violin be a sensory nightmare?
Well, it depends on who's controlling the volume knob. That's the key difference.
Ah.
Unpredictable noise is a threat. Organized sound, which is what music is a comfort. Music is math made audible. It has rhythm, it has structure, it has rules.
A C major scale is always a C major scale.
It never lies to you. Exactly. The source points out that this really appeals to the pattern recognition strengths of the artistic brain.
And it doesn't matter if you're listening or playing.
Right. Whether you're passively listening or actively playing, you're engaging with a structured system.
Yeah.
Plus, if you are playing in a group, like a band or a choir, it offers a social bridge.
How so? Because, I mean, bands can be pretty chaotic social environments.
Yes, but the interaction is mediated by the music. You don't need to make small talk about the weather. You just need to come in on the downbeat. The shared language is the rhythm, not the conversation. It removes all that ambiguity of social cues.
That distinction-mediated connection seems to be a recurring theme here, which actually leads us perfectly into the next section, the digital world. Now, I feel like we have to address the elephant in the room. There's this stereotype that video games are isolating or antisocial. With this guide, it seems to take a very different stance.
They completely challenge that stigma. They argue that gaming is one of the most effective tools for regulation and connection available.
They used a specific example that I really loved, a personal story about World of Warcraft. And it wasn't about the fighting or the raids.
No, it wasn't about the adrenaline at all. The contributor described the sensation of just soaring through the skies on a mount. They talked about the gathering professions, herbalism, mining.
So just flying around a digital landscape.
Yep, spotting a flower, landing, picking it, and watching a progress bar go up.
Sounds boring on paper,
Yeah,
but I can see how that loops right back to predictable joy.
it's a perfect feedback loop. The mechanics are clear. You do the work, you get the reward. There's no ambiguity.
Right.
But the source also mentions the social aspect of this. In a game like World of Warcraft, you can hang out with a guild. You can chat via text. You can be part of a team. But you can also mask less.
Masking being the effort to hide autistic traits to fit in.
Correct. In a digital avatar, you don't have to worry about your facial expressions, your body language, or making eye contact. You can just be the character. It lowers the barrier to entry for social interaction.
It's interesting, they also group coding and tech in this section. To me, coding feels like work, but the guide frames it almost like a creative pursuit.
Well, think about what coding is. It's world building with absolute logic.
Okay.
If you write the code in Python correctly, the program runs. If you miss a semicolon, it doesn't. It's a universe where the laws of physics are entirely under your control. For a logical thinker, that is incredibly soothing.
And for those who want that logic but maybe want to get off the screen, they bring up puzzles.
Yes, jigsaw puzzles, logic games. This brings us back to that psychological concept of the open loop.
An open loop.
An autistic brain can really struggle with open loops, unresolved situations, unfinished tasks, ambiguity. It creates this low-level hum of anxiety.
It's like having a browser tab open in your brain that you just can't close.
Exactly. A jigsaw puzzle is the ultimate closed loop. You start with chaos, a pile of cardboard shapes. You apply logic and pattern recognition, and when you click that final piece in,
Click.
that click isn't just satisfying, it's a neurochemical release. It says the chaos has been ordered, the task is done. It provides a deep sense of resolution that real life rarely offers.
So we have the screen, we have the puzzle table, now let's step outside. The guide moves to connecting with the physical world. And the first big one is gardening. Now, I have to push back a little here. We just talked about how much the autistic brain craves predictability. Nature is the definition of unpredictable. Bugs, weather, weeds. Isn't gardening a recipe for sensory disaster?
That is a very valid critique, and the source actually addresses this tension. They call gardening a controlled environment, which distinguishes it from the wild.
A controlled environment.
You're curating nature. You are deciding where the petunias go.
So it's like being the admin of a physical server.
In a way, yes. But the benefits here are sensory. The texture of the soil, the smell of basil, the sound of wind in the leaves. These are gentle sensory inputs compared to, say, a crowded shopping mall.
And there's a nurturing aspect too, I imagine.
A huge sense of purpose from taking care of a living thing and watching it thrive. But you're right, they do put a warning label on the outdoors.
They do.
Yeah, they explicitly state that outdoor adventures, hiking, camping can lead to sensory overload. Bright sun, sudden loud noises, uncomfortable temperatures.
So how do you mitigate that? Do you just not go?
No, you just prepare. The guides suggest bringing a grounding activity with you. If you go to the park, bring a book or a puzzle, or engage in something like bird watching.
Bird watching seems to be a huge favorite in the neurodivergent community.
It's essentially collecting in the real world. It requires patience, silence, and intense observation skills that many autistic adults possess in spades. It turns a chaotic walk in the woods into a structured treasure hunt.
Now, what about the body itself? The guide talks about martial arts, swimming, team sports. This is where we get into a term that I think we need to unpack. Proprioception.
Yes. It's a $10 word for very basic sense.
Go on.
Proprioception is just your body's ability to know where it is in space. If you close your eyes and touch your nose, that's proprioception at work.
Okay, I'm with you.
For many autistic individuals, that signal can be weak. Think of it like the GPS in your car being a little glitchy.
Ah, so you might bump into door frames or feel clumsy.
Exactly. Because your brain isn't getting an accurate read on where your limbs are.
So how does doing karate help with that?
Activities like martial arts or swimming provide deep pressure and resistance. The water pushing against you or the impact of hitting a pad sends a loud, clear signal to the brain. Here is your arm, here is your leg.
It recalibrates the GPS.
It recalibrates the GPS. It's incredibly grounding to feel physically located.
That is fascinating. I never thought about exercise as a calibration tool.
It's regulation through movement. And again, martial arts specifically is very structured. Katas, belts, rules. You know exactly what's expected of you in the dojo.
Speaking of rules and expectations, let's look at Section 4, the role of routine. The guide lists cooking and baking here. Again, for me, cooking dinner is a chore I try to avoid. But they frame it as a multi-sensory hobby.
Well, think about baking specifically. It's chemistry. You can't just wing it.
True.
You need 200 grams of flour, not 205. You need 350 degrees, not 375. For someone who loves routine and precision, following a recipe is a calming ritual.
It's an algorithm you can eat.
And the sensory reward is immediate. The smell, the texture of the dough, the taste, it hits every button.
Now, we need to talk about the section on special interests. The guide throws out a statistic that I found staggering.
Let me guess. The 75 to 95%.
Yes. 75 to 95% of autistic individuals have at least one special interest.
This is core to the autistic experience. In the past, clinical professionals might have labeled these as obsessions or fixations, which has a really negative connotation.
Right. Little Timmy is obsessed with trains. We need to stop that.
Exactly. But the neurodiversity movement and this guide reframes this completely. They call it deep research or fact-finding.
So learning everything about the Titanic or collecting specific minerals.
Or memorizing the lineage of the Targaryens. This isn't a symptom, it's a source of joy.
But where's the line? I mean, I can get pretty into a Netflix show for a weekend. Is that a special interest?
It's usually defined by its intensity and its duration. It becomes encyclopedic. It's about organizing information. And the guide notes that engaging in this, categorizing the minerals, building the spreadsheet of train schedules, it creates a flow state.
So it's not draining energy, it's generating energy.
Precisely. And often, these interests can be the bridge to that elusive social connection.
Which brings us to the final section. Socializing and environment. The guide calls hobbies a social bridge. We touched on this with music, but it seems to apply everywhere.
It solves the small talk problem. How are you? Is a terrifying question because it's so vague. But what do you think about the gear ratios on this 1950s locomotive? That's a great question because it has an answer.
It gives you a script.
It creates authentic connection based on shared passion rather than social niceties. And it allows for what the guide calls parallel play.
Now, hang on. Parallel play. Isn't that a term used for toddlers? Like two kids playing in a sandbox near each other but not with each other. It feels a little infantilizing to apply that to adults.
I can see why you'd say that, but the concept is actually really profound for adults. It's about companionship without demand.
Explain that.
It means I can be in the living room knitting and you can be in the chair reading and we are together, but I don't have to entertain you. I don't have to mask. I don't have to keep a conversation going.
It's the comfort of presence without the pressure of performance.
Right. Exactly. And for an autistic adult who is socially fatigued, that is often the highest form of intimacy.
The guide also mentions that sometimes these hobbies can evolve into more than just hobbies. They talk about vocational opportunities.
It makes sense, doesn't it? If you have a brain that naturally wants to spend 10,000 hours mastering a niche subject or writing code or painting, that's expertise.
Yeah.
The source mentions that if a hobby brings peace or joy, it counts, regardless of money. But yes, many autistic people do turn these deep interests into careers.
But there is a prerequisite to all of this. We can't just hand someone a paintbrush and say, go. The guide emphasizes the environment.
This is critical. You cannot engage in a hobby if your nervous system is under attack from your environment. The source lists tools, weighted blankets, noise-canceling headphones, and my personal favorite,
What's that?
tagless clothing.
The tagless clothing thing really struck me. I mean, I find tags annoying, but I just cut them off and move on.
For someone with tactile hypersensitivity, a tag scratching the back of their neck isn't just annoying, it's pain. Really?
It's a constant screaming signal that prevents focus. The guide emphasizes that comfort is a need, not a reward. You don't earn the right to wear soft clothes. You need to remove the sensory friction to access the joy of the hobby.
So we've covered everything from World of Warcraft to vegetable gardens, from the physics of sound to the scratching of a clothing tag. It's a lot.
It is.
Okay.
But if we zoom out, the message is actually quite simple. For autistic adults, hobbies are not optional extras. They are the toolkit for survival.
They form a triad.
Regulation, expression, and connection.
And the beauty is in the customization.
There is no one-size-fits-all. The best hobby is the one that fits your specific sensory profile. If you hate sticky hands, don't do pottery. If you love logic, learn Python. It's about honoring your own architecture.
I want to leave our listeners with a thought that's been nagging me since we discussed that special interest statistic. You said up to 95% of autistic adults have these deep, intense interests.
That's the number. So we have this massive population of people who are essentially natural-born researchers, archivists, and specialists. They have the ability to focus with an intensity that most neurotypical people can only dream of.
That is absolutely true.
So how much untapped innovation, how much breakthrough expertise is currently sitting in someone's basement, labeled merely as a hobby or an obsession, just because it doesn't fit the standard 9-to-5 mold?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We tend to view the autistic mind in terms of its deficits, what it can't do. But if you look at these hobbies, you see what it can do. Deep focus, pattern recognition, systematic thinking. Society is likely missing out on a massive cognitive asset by dismissing these passions as just ways to pass the time.
It definitely makes you rethink the question, so what do you do for fun? It might be a lot more important than we realize. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
My pleasure.